Howdy y'all, and welcome to the first episode of Tuesday's Tackle Tips. Now if you're new to the channel, I will ask if you do the whole spiel that you hear from every YouTuber, like, share, subscribe, do all of that, but I want to encourage you, if this is a video you like, do it. If it's a video you don't like, don't do it. I don't want people who don't like the videos watching the videos. That's not fun for them, that's not fun for me. It doesn't really get us anywhere, you know what I mean? Nonetheless, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the video. If you are a new or a budding fisherman, this is the perfect lure for you to start with and to really start expanding your arsenal in the wise of bass fishing. That is the Humble Texas Rig. So I'm going to show you how to rig up the Texas Rig, as well as additionally give you a couple tips on how you can fish the Texas Rig. So let's get into it. Now, one reason I say the Texas Rig is essential to use is because of its simplicity and its ability to catch finicky fish. So often as young fishermen and budding fishermen, we're catching fish out of these small farm ponds. And in these small farm ponds, the fish can get really finicky. And one way to combat that is by using a Texas Rig. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to mix up the colors, maybe mix up the hook, but you're going to be able to hook into a fish if you stay there long enough. Now, there are your extreme circumstances, but I feel like that's with anything. There are some days where you could throw your entire tackle box and not catch a fish. That's why it's fishing, not catching. So before we get into rigging up the Texas Rig, let's break down on the supplies you need. Now, obviously, you're going to need some form of stick bait or worm. This is just a Yum Dinger here. Pretty simple, run-of-the-mill. Costs you about $3 at Academy or Walmart or wherever you want to go pick it up. They are sold everywhere. They're your standard Cinco is what you'll often hear them called. And then you're also going to need some EWG hooks or some form of offset hook. Now, EWG just stands for extra wide gap, and I'm going to show you what that means. Now this right here is an extra wide gap hook. As you can see, it has an offset. Now most worm hooks have some form of offset, but what EWG means is it kind of flattens here at the top, but it pot bellies down at the bottom. And in my opinion, that makes it a little bit easier to rig, but especially when you're rigging stuff like swim baits or to something to that extent, Texas Rig style, EWGs really come in handy. I'm going to use it here though because it is simple to use, but any offset hook will work. So let's get into rigging it. So this worm has a little notch in it, and the idea is we get this extra wide gap hook to sit inside that notch. So we're going to rig the worm with the hook point facing the notch, kind of sitting up. So this is the top of the worm, this is the top of the hook. Makes perfect sense. So I'm going to take the hook and I'm going to go about to where that flat spot on the hook ends, and I'm going to hook it out the backside. So I just rotate it out like that. And I'm going to push it up the worm all the way to the eye of the hook, like so. So you can see it's kind of seated against it. So what I'm going to do now, I've got the bottom of the hook hanging out of the worm right there. So I'm going to put my thumb and measure where that hook needs to come out. So it's sitting up here where I want it to, but it's not rigged up here yet. So I'm going to stick my thumb right there. That's where I want the hook to come out of the top of the worm. So then I'm just going to take it and run it right beside my thumb and push it through. Now we're going to push it through the top. Look at that. Boom. Now, let's seat it. We're going to push it up. Cool. The problem is, when a fish comes or when it feels any kind of water on it, that hook's going to bend there and it's going to expose that. Any kind of weeds that we're going to run into, we're going to get snagged on. So what we can do is just inch this up a little bit and tuck it over the hook. And look at that. We have a weedless Texas Rig ready to go catch some big bass. So I'm going to run this through one more time, just a little bit faster. So we've got our notch side, and we're just going to run it till the end of the flat portion of the hook runs out, rotate it, measure where we want it to be, and then run it through. And look at that. Right where we want to be. That worm is perfectly straight, which is exactly what we want. That way it's going to run streamlined through that water. Perfection on a Texas Rig. Now, by grasping the Texas Rig, you're really going to open your possibilities into like the Carolina rigs and the donkey rigs and the other rigs of that nature. So kind of once you master the Texas Rig, at least the rigging portion, no one ever really masters fishing, except maybe Kevin Van Dam. That guy's pretty good. But once you really grasp into that, then start experimenting. Throw a weight on it. Let's throw some beads on it, maybe a spinner. Let's get into those complexities. That's what makes fishing fun, and sometimes that's what'll land you your PB. Now, like I said, I'm gonna break down where you kind of wanna throw the Texas rig. So the Texas rig is extremely versatile. You can use it in a bunch of different situations, but it is weedless. So if you really wanna edge along those weed beds, especially if you're throwing weightless, you got no weight on it, it's not gonna be able to punch through those weed beds, but you can run it alongside those weed beds, and you can either rip it and really get it going, so you're gonna jerk it really quick and it's gonna dart and swim and do all this kind of funky stuff depending on the lure that you've got on the end of it or the bait that you've got on the end of it. Or you can kind of dead stick it where you twitch it and let it sit, and you're not gonna really mess with it. You just sit, sit, sit. Lots of possibilities in regard to the Texas rig. Another thing you can do is put a little tungsten weight on the end of it, a tungsten bullet weight, and you're gonna start punching those weeds. Now, if I'm gonna throw a tungsten weight, I typically wanna throw something to the extent of maybe some 15 to 20 pound braid. It's not quite as hidden as, say, a monofilament, but if you're punching through weeds, you're really not worried heavily about visibility. You're just trying to get it down to the fish. Now, if I'm throwing weightless, I kind of like mono. The only problem with mono is it has a fair amount of stretch, and for a Texas rig, sometimes that can be a bit of a struggle. I almost never throw fluorocarbon on a Texas rig. That's a personal preference. I've learned a lot with line. You'll hear some people religiously say what line they use. For me, that's not the case. I have my favorites with certain baits, like spinner baits and crankbaits. I'm almost always going to throw some kind of fluorocarbon. But it's touch and go. You know, if I've only got braid and that's the only fishing rod with me, and I think a spinner bait's the best for that situation, guess what I'm gonna throw? I'm gonna throw a spinner bait. Might not be ideal, but it's what I've got and what I think will catch the most fish. So utilize those thoughts. Fishing is a game of experimentation. You've got your baseline, you've got your Texas rig. Now start experimenting with the setups you like. I throw a lot of bait casters with Texas rigs, or I'll downsize and throw some spinning rigs. It's really okay. Just the biggest thing I can say is find those weeds and experiment. Open water works sometimes, but the weeds are where the Texas rig really makes its money. So I hope you learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed Tuesday's Tackle Tips. It'll be back hopefully next Tuesday. If not, it'll be every other Tuesday. And like I said, like, share, subscribe, do all of that good stuff. We're gonna have a lot of fun on the channel, and we got a lot more coming. I'm sweating out here. It's pretty hot. It's about 95 at 8 o'clock at night in South Carolina, which, you know, just sounds about right. So I'll see y'all next time. Thanks for watching.